When Sergeant Jake Morrison decided to make an example of the smallest soldier in the 82nd Airborne Division, he thought he was teaching a lesson about combat readiness. Standing before 200 battle-hardened paratroopers, he towered over Sarah Collins, a 5 feet 4 inches supply clerk from Ohio, whose oversized gear and quiet demeanor made her an easy target for his brutal public humiliation. What Morrison didn't see was the tattoo that briefly appeared when Collins bent to collect her scattered equipment, but Captain Lisa Anderson saw it. 3 parallel scars intersected by a lightning bolt, the unofficial insignia of Ghost Unit, a classified counter-terrorism team that had been disbanded 3 years ago after a mission went catastrophically wrong. As Collins walked away with the fluid movements of someone trained to kill, Anderson realized that the most dangerous person in that warehouse wasn't the decorated sergeant with 15 years of special operations experience. It was the unassuming woman everyone had just dismissed as weak, a ghost hiding in plain sight, carrying secrets that could change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Alarm clock's shrill cry pierced the pre-dawn darkness at 0430 hours, just as it had every morning for the past 18 months. Sarah Collins rolled out of her narrow bunk in the women's barracks at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, moving with the mechanical precision of someone who had long ago stopped thinking about routine. Around her, a dozen other female soldiers groaned and fumbled for their gear in the dim emergency lighting. Most were support personnel like herself, mechanics, medics, communications specialists, the invisible backbone of the military machine that kept the glamorous combat units operational. "Morning, sunshine," called out Private Jennifer Walsh from the next bunk, her voice thick with sleep and sarcasm. Ready for another exciting day of counting ammunition and organizing supply closets? Sarah managed a weak smile as she pulled on her uniform. The same plain battle dress uniform that every soldier wore, but somehow it seemed to hang differently on her small frame. While other soldiers filled out their uniforms with the confidence of belonging, Sarah looked like a child playing dress-up in her father's clothes. "Living the dream, Jen," she replied, her voice carrying the same Midwestern accent that had marked her as an outsider from the moment she'd arrived at Fort Bragg. Ohio farm girl, the others called her when they thought she couldn't hear. Country mouse trying to play soldier. The morning routine was always the same. Physical training at 0500, where Sarah consistently finished in the bottom third despite clearly pushing herself to exhaustion. Breakfast in the mess hall, where she sat alone reading technical manuals while others socialized. Then 8 hours in the supply depot, cataloging equipment, processing requisitions, and trying to remain invisible. Supply Sergeant Martha Thompson had taken pity on the quiet girl from day one. At 55, Thompson had seen thousands of young soldiers pass through her depot, and she prided herself on reading people. Sarah Collins, she decided, was simply in over her head. "Collins," Thompson called out as Sarah arrived at the depot that morning, "I need you to inventory the new shipment of body armor. Check every piece against the manifest, note any discrepancies." It was busy work, the kind of task given to soldiers who couldn't be trusted with anything important. Sarah nodded without complaint and got to work, her movements methodical and precise as she examined each piece of equipment. What Thompson didn't notice, what no one noticed, was the way Sarah's hands moved across the armor. Not with the clumsy uncertainty of someone learning, but with the practiced efficiency of someone who had donned and doffed tactical gear thousands of times. Her fingers automatically checked stress points and attachment systems, testing ceramic plates with the unconscious expertise of someone whose life had once depended on such equipment. As she worked, fragments of conversation drifted over from the loading dock, where a group of rangers were collecting their gear for a training exercise. "Did you hear about Morrison's little demonstration yesterday?" one of them was saying. "Completely destroyed that supply girl. I felt almost bad for her. Why? Another voice replied. She's got no business being here. This isn't summer camp. We're training to go into combat zones where weakness gets people killed. Still, the first voice continued, seemed a bit harsh. She's just a kid from some farm in Ohio. Probably thought the military would be like her high school JROTC program. Sarah's hands never paused in their work, but something cold settled in her chest. Ohio farm girl. If only they knew. Sarah Michelle Collins had indeed grown up on a farm 300 acres of corn and soybeans outside the town of Millerville. Population 2,847. Her father, Robert Collins, had been a Vietnam veteran who'd come home broken and angry, finding solace only in the bottom of a bottle and the isolation of rural life. Her mother, Patricia, had died in a car accident when Sarah was 12. Leaving her to manage both the farm and her father's increasingly erratic behavior. By 16, Sarah had been handling all the farm's operations while maintaining a 4.0 GPA and serving as her high school's JROTC commander. The local Army recruiter, Staff Sergeant David Chen, had been impressed by her test scores and leadership potential. She'd scored perfect marks on the ASVAB and qualified for any military occupational specialty she wanted. You could be anything, Chun had told her during their final meeting. Intelligence analyst, military police, even special operations if you're willing to push yourself. The Army needs smart, dedicated soldiers like you. But that conversation had taken place in what felt like another lifetime. The Sarah Collins who had walked into that recruiter's office full of dreams and determination was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the greatest courage was in choosing to disappear. Her current assignment in supply wasn't punishment or incompetence. It was camouflage. The perfect cover for someone who needed to hide in plain sight, to become so unremarkable that no one would look too closely at her background, ask too many questions about her past, or wonder why someone with her test scores and leadership potential was content to count ammunition in a warehouse. The other soldiers saw exactly what she wanted them to see. A small-town girl who'd bitten off more than she could chew. Someone who lacked the physical and mental toughness for real military service. They saw weakness where she projected it, incompetence where she carefully displayed it, fear where she meticulously performed it. What they didn't see was the way she could field strip and reassemble her weapon in complete darkness in under 30 seconds. They didn't notice that she never slept deeply, that her eyes tracked every person entering or leaving the barracks, that she instinctively positioned herself near exits and maintained mental maps of every building she entered. They didn't see the small notebook she kept hidden beneath her mattress, filled with detailed observations about base security protocols, patrol patterns, and personnel schedules. They didn't know that she could identify the make and model of approaching vehicles by sound alone, or that she automatically counted steps and timed distances wherever she walked. Most importantly, they didn't see the carefully controlled exercises she performed in the abandoned storage building behind the motor pool every night after lights out. 2 hours of advanced combat drills that would have impressed even the Rangers who mocked her during the day. Movements so fluid and precise they seemed choreographed. Techniques that spoke of training far beyond anything the regular Army provided. Sarah Collins was a ghost hiding among the living. A wolf in sheep's clothing, a warrior pretending to be weak. And for 18 months, the disguise had worked perfectly. But disguises, no matter how carefully constructed, have a way of slipping at the worst possible moments. And as Captain Anderson had noticed the previous day, sometimes the truth has a way of revealing itself in the smallest details. A tattoo glimpsed in dim light, a movement too precise for someone supposedly untrained, an expression that held depths no supply clerk should possess. The question wasn't whether Sarah's secret would be discovered. The question was whether she would be ready when it was, and whether the truth would destroy her carefully constructed new life, or finally set her free from the ghosts. That had driven her into hiding. As she finished cataloging the last piece of body armor and prepared for another day of playing the role of the weak, incompetent soldier everyone expected her to be, Sarah had no idea that her performance was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. The storm was coming, and when it arrived, no amount of camouflage would be enough to hide what she really was. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The emergency klaxon shattered the pre-dawn silence at 0347 hours, 3 minutes before Sarah's usual wake-up time. But unlike the other soldiers who jolted awake in confusion, Sarah was already moving, her body responding to the alarm with the instant alertness of someone who had learned to sleep with one eye open. Asterisk. What the hell? Private Walsh mumbled, fumbling for her boots in the darkness. It's not scheduled training. Why are we? The lights flickered on, harsh and sudden, as the barracks door burst open. Staff Sergeant Morrison stood silhouetted in the doorway, his face grim in a way that made Sarah's blood run cold. This wasn't a drill. Everyone up. Full combat gear, 5 minutes. Morrison's voice carried a tension Sarah recognized, the controlled urgency of someone delivering news they wished they didn't have to share. We have a situation. As the other soldiers scrambled to dress, Sarah was already pulling on her boots. With mechanical precision, her mind raced through possibilities, analyzing Morrison's body language, the tone of the alarm, the unusual timing. Real emergencies didn't follow training schedules. Collins. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. You're with supply detail. Get to the depot and prepare emergency equipment distribution. Sarah nodded, but something in Morrison's eyes gave her pause. There was a flicker of something concern. Fear. That seemed directed specifically at her. As if he knew something she didn't. 15 minutes later, Sarah was jogging across the base toward the supply depot, her gear clanking with each step. The base was alive with activity vehicles racing between buildings, soldiers moving with purposeful urgency, the distant sound of helicopters spinning up. Whatever was happening, it was big. Supply Sergeant Thompson was already at the depot when Sarah arrived, her usually calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. Collins. Thank God. We need to distribute emergency supplies to all units. Immediately. Intelligence reports indicate. The rest of her sentence was lost as a massive explosion rocked the base. The lights went out, emergency power kicked in, and in the red glow of the backup lighting, Sarah saw something that made her heart stop. Through the depot's window, she could see armed figures moving across the compound. Not soldiers. Their equipment was wrong. Their movements too coordinated, too professional. These were operators. And they were moving with the precision of a team that had studied this base extensively. Get down, Sarah hissed, grabbing Thompson and pulling her behind a stack of ammunition crates. We're under attack. What? That's impossible. This is Fort Bragg. We have another explosion, closer this time. The depot's windows shattered, raining glass across the floor. In the chaos, Sarah heard something that made her blood freeze, the distinctive sound of suppressed weapons fire. Professional-grade equipment. Military precision. Through the broken windows, she could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions. The attackers had surrounded the depot. They weren't random terrorists, they were here for something specific. Or someone specific. How many? Thompson whispered, her voice shaking. Sarah's mind was already working, cataloging what she could see and hear. 12, maybe 15 in the immediate area. Coordinated assault, professional equipment. They've been planning this. How can you possibly know? Because I've seen this before. The words slipped out before Sarah could stop them. Thompson stared at her with confused eyes, but there was no time to explain. The sound of boots on concrete was getting closer. Sarah's Hands moved to her sidearm, checking the magazine with practiced ease. 15 rounds. Not much against a professional assault team, but it would have to do. Her mind was already shifting, the careful mask of incompetence falling away as older, deeper training took over. "Listen to me carefully," she whispered to Thompson. "There's a service tunnel in the back of the depot. It leads to the motor pool. When I give the signal, you run for it. Don't stop, don't look back, and don't wait for me. I'm not leaving you here alone. You're not leaving me alone." Sarah's voice carried a quiet authority that made Thompson's eyes widen. "You're following orders from someone who knows what she's doing." The footsteps were at the door now. Sarah could hear voices, professional, calm, efficient. They were about to breach. "Now," Sarah whispered. Thompson hesitated for a moment, then scrambled toward the back of the depot. Sarah waited until she heard the service tunnel door open, then moved. The first attacker through the door was expecting to find a cowering supply clerk. Instead, he found Sarah Collins, but not the Sarah Collins anyone at Fort Bragg knew. This was someone else entirely. Someone who moved like smoke and struck like lightning. The suppressed pistol in the attacker's hand never fired. Sarah's knife, a blade that had appeared in her hand as if by magic, found the gap between his body armor and helmet with surgical precision. He dropped without a sound. The second attacker was through the door before his partner hit the ground. Sarah was already moving, using the falling body as cover. Her sidearm spoke twice, both shots finding their mark with impossible accuracy in the dim red lighting. "Contact." The third attacker's voice carried professional calm even as he dove for cover. "Target is not civilian." "Repeat, target is not civilian." Sarah smiled grimly. The cat was out of the bag now. No more pretending to be weak. No more hiding behind the mask of incompetence. She was Sarah Collins, former Ghost Unit operative. And these people had just made the worst mistake of their lives. The next attacker came through the door with tactical precision, moving in a textbook breach pattern. Sarah was ready for him. She'd helped write that textbook. What followed was a masterclass in close-quarters combat that would have impressed the most elite special operations units. Sarah moved through the depot like a force of nature, using the terrain to her advantage, turning the attackers' own tactics against them. But even as she fought, her mind was analyzing the bigger picture. This wasn't random. These weren't terrorists or foreign agents. The equipment, the tactics, the precision. This was a professional military operation. Someone with serious resources and extensive intelligence about Fort Bragg, and they had come specifically for the supply depot. For her. As the last attacker in the immediate area fell, Sarah heard something that made her blood run cold. The sound of vehicles approaching. Many vehicles. This wasn't just a squad, it was a full assault force. She moved to the shattered window and peered out. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. Armored vehicles, professional soldiers, coordinated positions. At least 200 operatives, all moving with the precision of a unit that had trained together extensively. This wasn't an attack on Fort Bragg. This was an extraction operation. Someone wanted her badly enough to assault a major military installation with a private army. But who? And why now, after 3 years of carefully constructed anonymity? The answer came as she spotted a familiar figure moving among the assault team. Even in tactical gear, even at distance, she recognized the walk, the posture, the way he held his weapon. Colonel Marcus Kane, her former commanding officer. The man who had sent Ghost Unit on their final disastrous mission. The man she had trusted with her life, right up until the moment he'd tried to have her killed. Kane was supposed to be dead. She had made sure of that 3 years ago, in a confrontation that had left her the sole survivor of Ghost Unit and driven her into hiding. But there he was, very much alive and leading a private army onto American soil. Sarah's mind raced. If Kane was alive, then everything she thought she knew about that final mission was wrong. Ghost Unit hadn't been disbanded because of a mission. Gone wrong, they had been eliminated because they had discovered something. Kane couldn't let them live to reveal Dot, and now he had found her. The depot's radio crackled to life. Kane's voice, exactly as she remembered it, filled the air. "Sarah Collins, I know you're listening, I know you're in there. And I know you're wondering how I survived our last encounter." Sarah's jaw tightened. Of course he would want to gloat. Kane had always been theatrical. "You were always the best of Ghost Unit," Kane continued. "The most skilled, the most dedicated, the most naive. You actually believed we were the good guys. That our missions were sanctioned, that our targets were legitimate threats to national security." The radio fell silent for a moment. When Kane spoke again, his voice carried a note of genuine regret. "You were supposed to die with the rest of your team, Sarah. It would have been cleaner that way. But you survived, and then you disappeared. So completely that even I couldn't find you. I have to admit, I'm impressed. A supply clerk at Fort Bragg, hiding in plain sight among the very people you once protected." Sarah keyed the radio, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. "Hello, Marcus. You look good for a dead man." Kane's laugh was cold. "Death is just another cover identity, Sarah. You should know that better than anyone. After all, Sarah Collins of Ghost Unit died 3 years ago. The woman in that depot is just a farm girl from Ohio who couldn't handle real military service. Asterisk, what do you want?" "The same thing I've always wanted. To complete the mission." Ghost Unit discovered something they weren't supposed to know. "You're the last loose end." Sarah's mind was working furiously. Ghost Unit's final mission had been to investigate a weapons smuggling operation that was supplying American military equipment to terrorist organizations. They had traced the operation to its source, discovered it was being run by someone high up in the Pentagon, and been preparing to expose it when she breathed into the radio. "You were running the operation." "I was protecting national interests," Kane replied. "Sometimes that requires making deals with unsavory people. Your team was going to expose operations that were keeping America safe, even if they couldn't understand the larger picture. You were selling weapons to terrorists. I was managing assets in a complex geopolitical environment. The distinction matters, Sarah. It's the difference between a patriot and a traitor." Sarah closed her eyes, the pieces finally falling into place. Ghost Unit had been eliminated, not because they had failed, but because they had succeeded. They had discovered Kane's operation and been silenced before they could expose it. "So what now?" she asked. "You brought 200 soldiers to kill one supply clerk?" "I brought 200 soldiers to capture one of the most dangerous women." "Alive," Kane corrected. Ghost Unit training doesn't just disappear. Sarah, even if you've spent 3 years pretending to be weak, you're still a weapon. And weapons have a way of going off when you least expect them. The radio crackled again. "You have 2 choices. Come out peacefully, and I'll make sure your death is quick and clean. Stay in there, and I'll level the entire depot with you inside. Either way, this ends today." Sarah looked around the depot at the scattered equipment, the broken windows, the bodies of the attackers she had killed. 3 years of hiding, 3 years of pretending to be someone she wasn't, and it had all led to this moment. She could surrender, walk out with her hands up, and let Kane finish what he had started 3 years ago. It would be the end of her story, but at least it would be over, or she could fight. One woman against 200 professional soldiers. The smart money said she wouldn't last 10 minutes, but Sarah Collins had never been much for smart money. She keyed the radio one last time. "Marcus, I've got a third option for you. I'm listening. I'm going to kill every single one of your soldiers. Then I'm going to kill you. And then I'm going to expose the truth about Ghost Unit and make sure the world knows what kind of monster you really are." Kane's laugh was genuinely amused. "You always were my favorite, Sarah. Even when you were idealistic and naive, You had more heart than the rest of the team combined. But you're outnumbered 200 to 1. You're trapped in a building with limited ammunition and no support. What exactly do you think you can accomplish? Sarah smiled grimly as she began moving through the depot, gathering equipment and preparing for the fight of her life. I guess we're about to find out. The storm had finally arrived. And Sarah Collins, not the weak supply clerk, but the ghost unit operative who had once been the most feared soldier in America's most elite counter-terrorism unit, was about to remind the world why she had earned that reputation. The real battle was just beginning. The first thing Sarah needed was better positioning. The supply depot, while familiar, was ultimately a trap, 4 walls and limited exit routes. But 3 years of cataloging every piece of equipment that passed through had given her an intimate knowledge of the base's underground infrastructure that even Kane's intelligence couldn't match. She moved to the depot's rear storage area, where a seemingly innocuous maintenance hatch led to the storm drainage system. What Kane's assault team didn't know was that Fort Bragg's underground tunnels formed a network that connected nearly every major building on base. During her lonely months of night exercises, Sarah had mapped every inch of that system. The hatch opened with a soft metallic whisper. Sarah dropped into the tunnel, her boots splashing quietly in the shallow water that perpetually flowed through the drainage system. The familiar smell of concrete and dampness filled her nostrils as she began moving through the darkness, her mental map guiding her toward her first objective. Above ground, Kane's voice echoed through the depot's broken windows. Thermal imaging shows she's gone underground. Send teams to all tunnel access points. She's moving through the drainage system. Sarah smiled grimly. Kane was good, but he was thinking like a conventional military commander. He expected her to use the tunnels for escape or repositioning. He didn't realize she was hunting. The first tunnel access point was beneath the armory, a building that should have been heavily guarded, but was now conspicuously empty. Kane's people had cleared the area, concentrating their forces around the depot. It was a tactical error that spoke to overconfidence. Sarah emerged from the tunnel into the armory's basement, moving with the fluid silence that had once made her ghost unit's premier infiltration specialist. The building's security systems had been disabled. Kane's team had accessed it during their initial assault, but they hadn't bothered to leave guards behind. After all, what could one supply clerk do with military weapons? The answer, as it turned out, was quite a lot. Sarah moved through the armory like a child in a candy store, her hands selecting equipment with practiced efficiency. Fragmentation grenades, smoke canisters, plastic explosives, detonators, and enough ammunition to outfit a small army. But the real prize was in the special weapons locker, a Barrett M82 sniper rifle with thermal scope, and a case of .50 caliber ammunition. As she worked, Sarah's mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning her assault with the cold precision that had made Ghost Unit legendary. Kane had made several critical errors. He had underestimated her capabilities, overextended his forces, and failed to secure his flanks. She was going to make him pay for every mistake. The first explosion came exactly 18 minutes after Sarah had entered the tunnels. Kane's forward observation post, positioned on the depot's roof, simply vanished in a ball of fire and smoke. The 2-man team never had time to scream, "Sniper fire!" The report crackled over Kane's radio network. "She's got long-range capability, effective range approximately 800 meters. Kane's response was immediate and professional. "All units, disperse and take cover. She's got military-grade equipment now. This is no longer a containment operation, it's a firefight." But Sarah was already moving, using the smoke and confusion to reposition. The sniper rifle was powerful, but it was also loud and created a distinct muzzle flash that would give away her position. She had used it to announce her presence and force Kane's troops to spread out. Now she needed to get close. The second Phase of her assault began 10 minutes later, when the motor pool's fuel depot erupted in a massive fireball. Kane's vehicles, his primary means of mobility and heavy firepower, were now burning husks. The explosion was so intense that windows shattered in buildings 3 blocks away. "She's taking out our infrastructure," Kane muttered into his radio, "denying us mobility and support." Classic unconventional warfare tactics. What Kane didn't realize was that Sarah wasn't just using unconventional tactics, she was using Kane's own playbook against him. Every strategy, every technique, every psychological warfare principle he had taught Ghost Unit was now being turned against his forces. The third explosion came from an unexpected direction behind Kane's command post. Sarah had circled around using the tunnel system, emerging in the abandoned storage building where she had conducted her secret training sessions. The building was positioned perfectly to overlook Kane's temporary headquarters, and the shaped charge she had planted in the communications array eliminated his ability to coordinate with his scattered forces. "Command, this is Alpha Team. We've lost communications with base. Repeat, we have no radio contact. Bravo Team, report status. Charlie Team, respond." The radio chatter became increasingly frantic as Kane's soldiers realized they were fighting a ghost who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Sarah was using the darkness, the smoke, and the confusion to create the illusion of multiple attackers. Every few minutes, another explosion would rock a different part of the base, keeping Kane's forces off balance and reactive rather than proactive. But Sarah knew she couldn't keep this up indefinitely. She had superior knowledge of the terrain and the element of surprise, but Kane's forces still outnumbered her massively. Eventually, they would adapt to her tactics, coordinate their response, and overwhelm her through sheer numbers. She needed to force a decisive confrontation on her. Turns out the opportunity came when Kane made his own tactical error. Frustrated by the hit-and-run attacks, he began consolidating his forces around the base's central parade ground, using the open space to prevent Sarah from getting close enough for her ambush tactics. It was exactly what she had been waiting for. Sarah emerged from the tunnel system directly beneath the parade ground, using a maintenance access point that put her in the center of Kane's defensive perimeter. She had rigged the surrounding buildings with the remaining explosives, creating a kill zone that would channel Kane's forces into predictable positions. The first detonation brought down the East Barracks, sending a cloud of dust and debris across the parade ground. Kane's soldiers instinctively moved away from the collapse, clustering in the open center of the square. The second explosion toppled the West Administrative Building, trapping Kane's forces in an increasingly narrow corridor of safe ground. And then Sarah Collins stepped into the light. She stood in the center of the parade ground, silhouetted against the fires burning around the base. Gone was the hunched, uncertain posture of the supply clerk. This was a warrior in her element, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had been born to fight. "Hello, Marcus," she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the square. "Surprised to see me?" Kane emerged from behind an overturned vehicle, his sidearm drawn but not yet aimed. Around the square, his remaining forces, perhaps 60 soldiers, had taken cover behind whatever shelter they could find. The others were dead, wounded, or had fled into the darkness. "I have to admit," Kane said, his voice carrying genuine respect, "I underestimated you." The supply clerk act was more convincing than I expected. "You always were arrogant," Sarah replied, her own weapon held casually at her side. "It's what made you predictable. Even now, you're thinking like a conventional commander facing a conventional threat." "And what should I be thinking?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it was the Predator's smile that had once terrified terrorists across 3 continents. "You should be thinking about what you taught me. About asymmetric warfare. About using an enemy's strengths against them. About the fact that sometimes the best weapon isn't the biggest one, it's the one your enemy doesn't see coming." Kane's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? You brought 200 soldiers to kill one woman. Professional soldiers, well-equipped, well-trained. Your strength was your numbers, your firepower, your tactical superiority. Sarah began walking slowly toward Cain, her movements deliberate and hypnotic. But your weakness was your arrogance. You assumed I was still the same naive idealist you tried to kill 3 years ago. You're still outnumbered. Am I? Sarah's smile widened. Tell me, Marcus, how many of your soldiers do you have left? How many are combat effective? How many are still loyal to you after watching their comrades die for your personal vendetta? Cain's jaw tightened. Around the square, his soldiers were beginning to exchange glances, their weapons wavering between Sarah and their commander. The doubt was spreading like a virus. You see, Sarah continued, still walking closer, you made one critical error. You assumed this was about you and me. But it's not. It's about truth. About justice. About making sure that what happened to Ghost Unit never happens to anyone else. She stopped walking, now close enough that Cain could see the determination in her eyes. Your soldiers aren't just fighting for you, Marcus. They're fighting for a lie, and deep down, they know it. Cain raised his weapon, but his hand was shaking slightly. You're one person, Sarah. One person against my entire operation. You can't win. I already have, Sarah said quietly. Because in about 30 seconds, every major news network in the country is going to receive a data package containing the complete records of Ghost Unit's final mission. Evidence of your weapons smuggling operation. Proof that you've been selling American military equipment to terrorist organizations for the past 5 years. Cain's face went pale. That's impossible. Those records were destroyed. The official records, yes, but Ghost Unit was very thorough. We kept our own copies, our own evidence. Hidden, encrypted, and programmed to release automatically if certain conditions were met. Conditions like my biometric signature failing to check in every 72 hours. Sarah's smile was cold as winter. I've been dead for about 6 minutes now, Marcus. The world is about to learn the truth about what really happened to Ghost Unit, and about what kind of monster you really are. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of fires and the distant sound of approaching sirens. Fort Bragg's emergency response teams were finally mobilizing, drawn by the explosions and gunfire. Cain's weapon was fully raised now, aimed directly at Sarah's chest. Then I guess I have nothing left to lose. No, Sarah said, her own weapon coming up with lightning speed. You don't. The shots rang out simultaneously, echoing across the parade ground like twin thunderclaps. But only one of them found its target. Colonel Marcus Cain crumpled to the ground, his weapon clattering away across the concrete. Sarah stood over him, her smoking pistol still trained on his motionless form. That was for Ghost Unit, she said quietly. And for every soldier who died because of your greed. Around the square, Cain's remaining forces were lowering their weapons, their faces showing a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The fight was over, the truth was out. And Sarah Collins, a real Sarah Collins, was finally free to stop hiding. But as she looked around at the burning base, at the bodies scattered across the parade ground, at the destruction she had wrought in the name of justice, Sarah wondered if freedom was worth the price she had paid for it. The ghost had awakened. The question now was whether she could learn to live with what she had become. The first news van arrived at Fort Bragg's main gate exactly 43 minutes after the data package hit the networks. By dawn, the entire perimeter was surrounded by satellite trucks, reporters, and federal agents from half a dozen agencies. The story was too big to contain, too explosive to ignore. Sarah watched the circus from the base hospital's secure wing, her left arm in a sling from shrapnel she hadn't noticed during the firefight. The endorphins of combat had masked the pain, but now that the adrenaline was wearing off, every muscle in her body ached. She felt every one of her 28 years, plus a few more, Colonel Patricia Hayes, Fort Bragg's commanding officer, sat across from her in the sterile hospital room, flanked by two men in expensive suits who had introduced themselves as government liaisons. Their badges said FBI, but Sarah recognized the type intelligence community, probably CIA or NSI, the kind of people who cleaned up messes that couldn't be allowed to see daylight. "Let's start from the beginning," Hayes said, her voice carefully neutral. "Your real name is Sarah Michelle Collins, formerly Sergeant First Class, United States Army Special Operations Command. You were reported killed in action 3 years ago during a classified mission in Syria." Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving the two suits. They hadn't spoken yet, but she could feel their presence like a weight in the room. "That's correct. According to the records that were released to the media," Hayes continued, consulting a thick folder, "you were part of a unit called Ghost Unit, which was investigating weapons smuggling operations in the Middle East. Your team was allegedly eliminated by Colonel Marcus Kane to prevent you from exposing his criminal activities." "Not allegedly," Sarah corrected. "Kane murdered my team. 6 of the best soldiers I've ever known, killed by their own commanding officer, because they discovered he was selling weapons to the same terrorists we were fighting." One of the suits finally spoke. "Miss Collins, I'm Agent Richardson from the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. We've been investigating Colonel Kane's activities for the past 2 years. Your explosive revelation last night has confirmed many of our suspicions." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "You've been investigating for 2 years? My team gathered enough evidence to convict Kane in 6 weeks. Where were you when my friends were dying?" "We had to be careful," Richardson replied. "Kane had powerful allies, protected sources, political connections. We couldn't move without ironclad proof, and now you have it. Written in blood across a military base." Sarah's voice carried the weight of 3 years of suppressed rage. 6 soldiers died because you were too careful. How many more died because Kane's weapons ended up in terrorist hands? The room fell silent. Through the window, Sarah could see reporters setting up for live broadcasts, their faces animated with the thrill of breaking news. The story was already spreading across social media, cable news, international outlets. There would be no containing it now. Hayes leaned forward. "Sarah, what happened last night was unprecedented. A single soldier taking on a private army and winning. The media is calling you a hero, but there are also questions about the methods you used. The body count was significant. 87 dead," Sarah said quietly. "I counted. Each one was a choice, their life or mine, their freedom or justice for Ghost Unit." She looked directly at Richardson. "I sleep fine at night. Can you say the same?" Asterisk, the second suit, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Ms. Collins, I'm Deputy Director Carson from the Central Intelligence Agency. We have a problem." Sarah's attention sharpened. CIA involvement meant this was about to get much more complicated. "Kane's operation was larger than we initially understood," Carson continued. "He wasn't just selling weapons to terrorist organizations. He was part of a network that includes defense contractors, foreign intelligence services, and at least 3 sitting members of Congress. Your data release has exposed the tip of an iceberg that goes very deep." "Good," Sarah said. "Let it all come out. It's not that simple. Some of Kane's activities were conducted under official cover, with the knowledge and approval of certain government agencies. If everything comes to light, it could compromise ongoing operations, expose intelligence assets, destabilize allied governments." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You want me to help you cover it up?" "We want you to help us manage the revelation responsibly," Carson corrected. "Work with us. Help us separate the legitimate operations from Kane's criminal activities. Ensure that justice is served without compromising national security." "National security?" Sarah's voice was flat. The same justification Cain used when he murdered my team. When he sold weapons to our enemies. When he turned patriotic soldiers into collateral damage for his personal profit. She stood up, ignoring the protest from her injured arm. I've heard enough. I did what I came to do. Cain is dead. The truth is out, and Ghost Unit has been avenged. What you do with the rest is your problem. Miss Collins, Richardson said urgently, you need to understand your position. You're technically AWOL. You've been officially dead for 3 years. Your actions last night, while arguably justified, resulted in massive property damage and significant loss of life. There will be consequences. Sarah paused at the door. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice, Carson said. Work with us, and you'll be quietly reinstated, given a new identity, set up with a comfortable life somewhere safe. Fight us, and you'll spend the rest of your life fighting legal battles, congressional hearings, and media scrutiny. And if I choose neither? Carson's smile was thin. There is no third option, Ms. Collins. You're either with us or against us. And you've seen what happens to people who go against the system. Sarah turned back to face them, her expression calm. You're right. I have seen what happens. But you seem to have missed the point of last night's demonstration, which was, the system failed. It failed Ghost Unit. It failed the soldiers who died because of Cain's weapons. And it failed every American who trusted their government to protect them. Last night, I didn't work within the system, I broke it. And I'm prepared to do it again. She opened the door, then looked back one more time. Oh, and gentlemen, if anything happens to me, if I have an accident, if I disappear, if I commit suicide, there's another data package waiting to be released. One that contains everything I know about the intelligence community's involvement in weapons smuggling, drug trafficking, and political assassination. A dead man's switch that makes last night's revelation look like a gentle breeze before a hurricane. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving the 3 officials staring at each other in stunned silence. Sarah walked through the hospital corridors, past the military police guards who had been assigned to protect her, past the nurses, who whispered and stared, past the administrative staff who had processed her paperwork. She was no longer the invisible supply clerk who had hidden in plain sight for 3 years. She was Sarah Collins, the woman who had taken on an army and won. But victory, she was learning, came with its own complications. In the parking lot, she found Captain Lisa Anderson waiting by a black SUV. Anderson had been the one to first notice the Ghost Unit tattoo, the one who had started asking questions that led to Sarah's exposure. She looked nervous, uncertain, like someone who had pulled a thread and watched an entire tapestry unravel. Sergeant Collins, Anderson said, then caught herself. I'm sorry. I don't know what your rank is now, or if you even have one. Sarah. Will do, she replied. Just Sarah. I wanted to thank you for what you did last night, for the truth you brought to light. But I also wanted to apologize. If I hadn't noticed that tattoo, if I hadn't started investigating. You did your job, Sarah interrupted. You saw something that didn't fit, and you asked questions. That's what good soldiers do. But the consequences were inevitable. Cain would have found me eventually. This way, at least Ghost Unit's story gets told. Their sacrifice gets recognized. Their families get closure. Anderson nodded, then held out a set of keys. These are for the SUV. It's fueled and ready. There's a bag in the back with clothes, cash, and a clean phone. No one knows I'm here. Sarah took the keys, surprised. Why? Because sometimes the system needs to be broken, Anderson replied. And sometimes the person who breaks it needs help disappearing long enough to figure out what comes next. As Sarah drove away from Fort Bragg, she could see the media circus. In her rearview mirror, the story would dominate the news cycle for weeks, maybe months. Congressional hearings would be held. Investigations would be launched. Careers would be destroyed and reputations ruined. But Sarah Collins, the woman who had started it all, would be gone. Disappeared into the vast American landscape, carrying the truth of what had really happened to Ghost Unit, and the knowledge that sometimes justice required stepping outside the law. The ghost had awakened, delivered her message, and vanished. Once again. But this time, she wasn't hiding from the truth, she was carrying it with her. A burden and a responsibility that would define the rest of her life. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in 3 years, Sarah Collins was free to choose her own path. And that, she thought as the base disappeared behind her, was worth any price she might have to pay. The reckoning was complete. The real work was just beginning. 3 months after Fort Bragg, Sarah Collins was dead again. This time, it was official. A car accident on a rain-slicked highway outside Tucson, Arizona. The local news covered it for exactly 1 evening. Mystery woman dies in desert crash. No mention of Ghost Unit. No connection to the military scandal that had rocked Washington. Just another tragic accident on America's dangerous highways. The woman who had died in that crash bore Sarah's fingerprints, her dental records, even her DNA. The body was cremated within 48 hours. The ashes scattered in an unmarked grave. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic efficiency, the kind of operation that required resources, connections, and the absolute certainty that loose ends needed to be tied up permanently. Unfortunately, for those who had orchestrated Sarah's second death, the woman in the morgue wasn't Sarah Collins. She was Maria Santos, an undocumented immigrant who had died 3 days earlier from a drug overdose in a Phoenix shelter. Her body had been claimed by a funeral home that specialized in handling the deaths of people with no families. No questions asked. The real Sarah Collins was 800 miles away, standing in the rain outside a coffee shop in Missoula, Montana, reading about her own death on a smartphone she would discard within the hour. She felt a familiar coldness settle in her chest, not surprise, but confirmation of what she had known since leaving Fort Bragg. They would never stop hunting her. Phone buzzed with an encrypted message from a number she didn't recognize. Coffee shop. Corner booth. 5 minutes. Come alone. Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward the Glock concealed beneath her jacket. After 3 months of running, she had developed paranoia to an art form. Every face was potentially hostile, every coincidence potentially lethal. But something about the message felt different, urgent, but not threatening, familiar in a way she couldn't place. She entered the coffee shop through the rear entrance, her eyes automatically scanning for threats, exit routes, and potential weapons. The corner booth was occupied by a woman in her 50s, graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing the kind of unremarkable clothing that screamed federal agent. But when the woman looked up, Sarah's blood ran cold. Detective Janet Morrison, Seattle Police Department. The older sister of Sergeant Jake Morrison, the man who had humiliated Sarah in front of the 82nd Airborne Division months ago. The same Morrison who had called her weak, questioned her belonging, predicted her failure. "Hello, Sarah," Detective Morrison said quietly. "Please sit down. We need to talk." Sarah remained standing, her hand still near her weapon. "If you're here to arrest me, I'm here because my brother is dead," Morrison interrupted, her voice heavy with grief and anger. "Killed 2 weeks ago in what the Army is calling a training accident. But Jake didn't die in an accident, Sarah. He was murdered. Just like your Ghost Unit teammates. Just like everyone else who gets too close to the truth." Sarah slowly slid into the booth across from her, processing this new information. Jake Morrison had been an ass, but he had also been a dedicated soldier. His death wasn't a coincidence. "What happened?" Sarah asked. "Jake couldn't let it go," Detective Morrison replied. "After Fort Bragg, after the news broke about Kane and the weapons smuggling, he started asking questions about his own units. Equipment. He noticed discrepancies in ammunition counts, weapons that went missing and reappeared, supply shipments that didn't match manifests. Sarah's mind was already working, connecting dots that formed a disturbing pattern. He found evidence of the smuggling operation at Fort Bragg. More than that, he found evidence that it's still operating. Kane might be dead, but his network is alive and well. They've just gotten better at covering their tracks. Detective Morrison pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. The screen showed a series of photographs shipping containers. Manifest documents, faces Sarah didn't recognize but instinctively distrusted. Jake gathered this over 6 weeks of investigation, Morrison continued. He was planning to turn it over to the FBI when he died. Explosive decompression during a routine parachute jump. Equipment failure, they said. Except Jake had packed his own chute that morning, and he'd been jumping for 15 years without incident. Sarah studied the photographs, her trained eye picking up details that would be meaningless to civilians, but spoke volumes to someone with her background. The shipping containers were marked with legitimate company logos, but the loading patterns were wrong for their supposed contents. The manifest documents showed legal cargo, but the weight distribution suggested hidden compartments. And the faces in the surveillance photos had the hard, professional look of mercenaries, rather than legitimate businessmen. "This is bigger than Kane," Sarah said, voicing what they were both thinking. "This is an entire infrastructure. Shipping, logistics, security, political protection. Someone rebuilt the operation from scratch. Someone with resources, connections, and the absolute certainty that they're untouchable," Morrison agreed. "Someone who can kill a decorated army sergeant and make it look like an accident. Someone who can fake your death and expect it to stick." Sarah looked up from the tablet. "Why are you showing me this? Why not take it to the FBI yourself?" Morrison's laugh was bitter. "Because I'm a Seattle cop, and this goes way above my pay." "Great. Because Jake trusted federal agencies, and look where it got him. Because you're the only person who's actually fought these people, and won." "I didn't win," Sarah corrected. "I survived. There's a difference. You exposed Kane. You brought the truth to light. You made them bleed. And now they've learned from their mistakes. They're smarter, more careful, better protected." Sarah closed the tablet and slid it back across the table. "Whatever Jake found, whatever this new operation is, it's not my fight anymore." But even as she said the words, Sarah knew they weren't true. She could walk away, disappear into the vast American landscape, create a new identity, and live a quiet life somewhere. Safe, but Jake Morrison would still be dead. Ghost Unit would still be unavenged. And somewhere, weapons marked with American serial numbers would continue flowing to terrorists and criminals while the people responsible slept soundly in their comfortable beds. Detective Morrison seemed to read her thoughts. "Jake used to talk about you after Fort Bragg, said you were tougher than you looked, that there was something about you that didn't fit. He felt bad about how he treated you, wanted to apologize when he found out the truth." Sarah felt an unexpected pang of emotion. Jake Morrison had been cruel to her, but he had also been a soldier doing what he thought was right. In the end, that dedication had gotten him killed. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Sarah said, "What you do best. Investigate, infiltrate, expose the truth." Morrison pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "Jake left this with a friend, told him to give it to me if anything happened. It's an address in Baltimore. A warehouse. He thought it was a key distribution point for the operation." Sarah took the card, studying the address. Baltimore was a major port city, perfect for moving contraband through legitimate shipping channels. It was also dangerous territory, urban, densely populated, with multiple federal agencies and local law enforcement that might not appreciate a wanted fugitive operating in their jurisdiction. "There's something else," Morrison said. Jake's investigation uncovered a name. Someone high up in the Pentagon, someone with access to classified shipping manifests and military equipment inventories. Someone who would have known about Ghost Unit's investigation 3 years ago. Who? General Patricia Walsh, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations. She's been fast-tracked for promotion to Joint Chiefs. Her confirmation hearings start next week. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She knew that name, but not from any Pentagon organizational chart. Patricia Walsh had been Jake Morrison's commanding officer at Fort Bragg. She had been the one to assign him to investigate equipment discrepancies. She had been the one who knew exactly what he was looking for and where he was likely to find it. Jake wasn't killed because he discovered the smuggling operation, Sarah realized. He was killed because someone led him to discover it. Someone who needed him to find specific evidence at a specific time. A setup, Morrison agreed. But for what purpose? Sarah was already standing, her mind racing through possibilities. Walsh was using Jake's investigation for her own ends, possibly to eliminate competition within the smuggling network, possibly to position herself as the heroic whistleblower who exposed corruption while protecting her own involvement. Your brother stumbled into the middle of a power struggle, Sarah said. Walsh is consolidating control of the operation, eliminating rivals and potential threats, including investigators who might dig too deep. And now she's about to be promoted to one of the highest positions in the military, Morrison said. With access to operations worldwide, resources that would make Kane's smuggling ring look like a neighborhood drug dealer. Sarah was already moving toward the door. If Walsh was behind Jake's death, if she was positioning herself to take control of a military-industrial smuggling network, then the confirmation hearings weren't just a promotion, they were a coronation. In 1 week, Patricia Walsh would have the power to ship American weapons to anyone, anywhere, with the full authority of the United States government. "Where are you going?" Morrison called after her. "To Baltimore," Sarah replied without looking back. "To find out what your brother died for, and to make sure Walsh doesn't get away with it." "Sarah, wait." Morrison caught up with her at the door. "This isn't like Fort Bragg. You won't be fighting mercenaries and private armies. Walsh has the full resources of the Pentagon behind her. If you go after her, you'll be taking on the entire military establishment." Sarah smiled, and for the first time in months, it was the Predator's smile that had once terrified terrorists across 3 continents. Good. I was getting bored with easy targets. As she walked out into the Montana rain, Sarah Collins felt the familiar weight of purpose settling on her shoulders. Jake Morrison had been an ass, but he had also been a soldier seeking the truth. He deserved justice, just like Ghost Unit deserved justice. The hunt was beginning again. But this time, Sarah wasn't running from her past, she was embracing it. And General Patricia Walsh was about to learn why Ghost Unit had been the most feared counter-terrorism team in the world. The ghost was awakening once more, and this time she was hunting bigger prey. The Baltimore warehouse district at 3 a.m. was a maze of shadows and industrial decay, where legitimate commerce ended and the gray market began. Sarah moved through the labyrinth of shipping containers and abandoned buildings like a predator stalking prey, every sense attuned to the subtle signs of human activity in the urban wasteland. The address Detective Morrison had given her led to a nondescript facility sandwiched between a defunct auto parts distributor and a seafood processing plant that had seen better decades. From the outside, Meridian Logistics looked exactly like what it claimed to be. Mid-tier freight forwarding company handling the unglamorous but necessary work of moving cargo through Baltimore's sprawling port complex. But Sarah's trained eye caught the details that marked it as something else entirely. The security cameras were military-grade thermal imaging units, not the standard commercial surveillance equipment. The loading dock had reinforced concrete barriers designed to stop vehicle-borne explosives. And the workers moving containers in the pre-dawn hours moved with the disciplined efficiency of soldiers, not longshoremen. She had been watching the facility for 6 hours, cataloging patterns, identifying vulnerabilities, building a tactical picture of what she was walking into. The operation was sophisticated rotating security patrols, staggered shift changes, multiple layers of perimeter defense. This wasn't Kane's crude mercenary operation. This was military precision applied to criminal enterprise. Sarah's earpiece crackled with Detective Morrison's voice, transmitted through an encrypted communication system that had cost more than most people's annual salary. I count 15 personnel on the night shift. Armed, coordinated, probably ex-military. Copy that, Sarah whispered back. Morrison was positioned in a surveillance van 8 blocks away, monitoring police frequencies and federal communication channels for any sign that Sarah's presence had been detected. It wasn't ideal. Sarah preferred working alone, but Morrison's connections in law enforcement had already proven invaluable for intelligence gathering. Sarah, I'm picking up chatter on a federal frequency. FBI is running a surveillance operation 3 blocks from your position. They're not watching the warehouse, but if things go loud, they won't, Sarah interrupted. This wasn't Fort Bragg, where explosive confrontation had been necessary to expose Kane's crimes. This was about gathering evidence, documenting the operation, building a case that could bring down General Walsh before her confirmation hearings. Sarah moved closer to the facility's perimeter, using the maze of shipping containers as cover. The warehouse's main entrance was heavily monitored, but industrial facilities always had weak point service entrances, utility access, loading bays designed for efficiency rather than security. She found her opening in the building's northeast corner, where a storm drain passed beneath the facility's foundation. The drain was too small for most adults, but Sarah's slight frame had always been an advantage in infiltration work. She squeezed through the concrete tube, emerging in a utility basement filled with the hum of electrical systems and climate control equipment. The basement was empty. Security focused on the upper levels where the actual cargo was stored and processed. Sarah moved through the mechanical spaces like a ghost, following building schematics she had memorized from city planning records. Her destination was the main floor, where Jake Morrison's investigation had identified the primary shipping and receiving operations. The stairwell leading up was monitored by motion sensors, but Sarah had come prepared. The device she attached to the sensor array was smaller than a matchbook, designed to loop the previous 30 seconds of video feed indefinitely. To anyone monitoring the cameras, the stairwell would appear empty even as Sarah passed through. Main warehouse floor was a cavern of activity despite the late hour. Shipping containers lined the space in precise rows, each marked with legitimate company logos and shipping manifests. But Sarah's trained eye immediately spotted the anomalies, containers that were heavier than their contents should allow, manifest weights that didn't match the loading equipment being used, security protocols that were excessive for legal cargo. She moved between the container rows, photographing serial numbers and shipping documents with a camera designed for covert surveillance. Each image was automatically uploaded to a secure server, creating a permanent record that would survive even if Sarah didn't. Getting good intel, she whispered into her earpiece. Shipping manifests show agricultural equipment bound for Somalia, medical supplies for Syria, construction materials for Afghanistan, but the handling protocols suggest weapons and ammunition. How can you tell? Morrison's voice was tense. Weight distribution, loading patterns, the type of security being used. You don't need armed guards and explosive-resistant containers to ship tractors and bandages. Sarah reached a container that stood apart from the others, marked with a shipping label that made her blood run cold. The manifest showed it bound for a humanitarian organization in Yemen, carrying emergency medical supplies. But Sarah recognized the organization's name from Ghost Unit's intelligence files. It was a front group for terrorists who had killed American soldiers with weapons that bore U.S. military serial numbers. She was photographing the container's markings when she heard footsteps approaching. Sarah melted into the shadows between containers, controlling her breathing as two security guards passed within arm's reach of her position. "Shipment goes out tomorrow night," one of them was saying. "Boss wants extra security on this one." "Apparently. It's high priority. What's so special about medical supplies?" The second guard asked. "Let's just say these particular medical supplies have a very short shelf life and a very big bang." The first guard replied with dark humor. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Not weapons, explosives. Probably military-grade ordnance disguised as humanitarian aid, destined for terrorist organizations that would use it against American forces or innocent civilians." After the guards passed, Sarah moved deeper into the warehouse, following the container rows toward what appeared to be an administrative area. If this operation was as sophisticated as it appeared, there would be records, communication logs, financial transactions that could tie the smuggling directly to General Walsh. The administrative section was on the warehouse's mezzanine level, accessible by a freight elevator that was currently locked down. But Sarah had never met a lock she couldn't bypass, especially when the stakes were this high. Her lockpicking tools were disguised as a simple pen set, and the electronic lock yielded to her ministrations in under 2 minutes. The mezzanine level was a different world from the warehouse floor-carpeted hallways, office spaces, conference rooms that wouldn't look out of place in any corporate headquarters. But the security was even tighter here, with biometric scanners and motion detectors that spoke to the sensitive nature of whatever business was conducted in these rooms. Sarah bypassed the main offices, following building schematics toward what appeared to be a communication center. If she could access the facility's computer systems, she might be able to download shipping records, financial transactions, communication logs, everything needed to expose the operation. The communication center was protected by both electronic and physical security, but Sarah had trained for exactly this type of infiltration during her Ghost Unit days. She disabled the motion sensors with the same type of loop device she had used on the stairwell cameras, then went to work on the doors. Electronic lock. Inside, banks of computer servers hummed quietly, processing the data that kept Meridian Logistics operations running smoothly. Sarah connected a data extraction device to the primary server, a piece of equipment that would copy everything on the system while leaving no trace of the intrusion. While the device worked, Sarah accessed one of the computer terminals, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she navigated through layers of security. What she found exceeded her worst expectations. Meridian Logistics wasn't just a smuggling operation, it was a distribution hub for a network that spanned the globe. Weapons, explosives, chemical precursors, advanced technology, all flowing through legitimate shipping channels to destinations where they would cause maximum damage to American interests. And at the center of it all was General Patricia Walsh. Her digital signature on shipping authorizations, her bank account receiving payments from shell companies, her Pentagon access codes used to authenticate the transfer of military equipment to supposedly legitimate recipients. But the most damning evidence was a series of encrypted communications between Walsh and someone identified only as Prometheus. The messages discussed asset elimination, operational security, and neutralizing investigative threats. Jake Morrison's name appeared in several of the communications, along with dates that corresponded to his investigation timeline. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read the final message in the chain, sent just 2 days ago. Collins' problem resolved. Asset eliminated. Operation Lighthouse cleared for Phase 2 implementation. They thought she was dead. Walsh believed the car accident in Arizona had eliminated the last threat to her operation, which meant Sarah had a brief window of opportunity before they realized their mistake. The data extraction device finished its work, copying terabytes of information that would be enough to destroy Walsh's career and expose the entire smuggling network. Sarah pocketed the device and prepared to leave, but froze as she heard voices in the hallway outside. "Sir, "We're getting anomalous readings from the communication center," a voice was saying. "Could be equipment malfunction, but protocol requires a visual inspection." Sarah's mind raced. The loop devices she had planted were good, but not perfect. Extended observation might reveal the deception, especially if they were specifically looking for irregularities. "Check it out," a second voice replied. "And run a full facility sweep. Something feels off tonight." Sarah had perhaps 90 seconds before security reached the communications center. The window she had come through was too far away, and the main door would lead her directly into the security team. But Ghost Unit training had taught her that sometimes the best escape route was the one that led deeper into danger. She moved to the server room's emergency exit, a fire door that led to an external staircase. The door was alarmed, but Sarah had no choice. As the klaxon began wailing throughout the facility, she burst through the door and began descending the metal staircase 3 steps at a time. "Sarah, what's happening?" Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. "I'm reading alarms, emergency frequencies lighting up." "Extraction compromised," Sarah replied as she reached the ground level. "Package secured, but they know someone was here." Floodlights blazed to life across the warehouse complex as Sarah ran for the perimeter fence. Behind her, she could hear shouting, running footsteps, the sound of vehicles starting. The entire facility was mobilizing to find the intruder. Sarah reached the fence line as the first security team rounded the corner of the warehouse. Automatic weapons fire erupted behind her, bullets sparking off the concrete and metal around her position. She dove through a gap in the chain-link fence, rolling to absorb the impact as she hit the ground on the other side. "I'm clear of the facility," she gasped into her earpiece as she ran through the maze of abandoned buildings beyond the warehouse district. "But they'll be hunting now. Walsh will know someone penetrated her operation. Did you get what we needed?" Morrison asked. Sarah patted the data extraction device in her pocket, its contents worth more than gold in the coming battle against General Walsh. "We got everything. Communications, financial records, shipping manifests, the whole operation. Walsh is finished." But even as she said the words, Sarah knew the fight was just beginning. Walsh had the resources of the Pentagon behind her, political connections that reached the highest levels of government, and the absolute certainty that exposure would mean life in prison or worse. She wouldn't go down without a fight. And that fight would make Fort Bragg look like a training exercise. Sarah Collins was about to take on the most powerful military establishment in the world. But this time, she had something she hadn't possessed before: ironclad proof of their crimes and the righteous fury of a soldier who had seen too many good people die for other people's greed. The real war was about to begin. The Russell Senate office building at dawn was a fortress of marble and political ambition, where the most powerful decisions in America were made behind closed doors by people who would never face the consequences of their choices. Sarah Collins stood across the street, watching early morning staffers hurry through the building's entrance, each one carrying the weight of democracy on their smartphones and coffee cups. General Patricia Walsh's confirmation hearing was scheduled to begin in 6 hours. By sunset, she would either be confirmed as the newest member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, with access to military operations worldwide, or she would be exposed as the architect of a global weapons smuggling network that had cost countless lives. Sarah adjusted the small device in her ear, testing the encrypted communication link with Detective Morrison, who was positioned in a rented office building 12 blocks away. The evidence they had gathered from the Baltimore warehouse was devastating, but getting it into the right hands had proven more complicated than either of them had anticipated. "The journalists are getting cold feet," Morrison's voice crackled through the earpiece. "3 major outlets have declined to publish the story. They're saying they need more time to verify the evidence, but I think they're being pressured." Sarah wasn't surprised. Walsh had spent decades building relationships throughout Washington's power structure. Newspaper editors, television producers, congressional staffers, all of them owed favors or feared consequences. A story this explosive wouldn't see daylight through normal channels. What about the FBI contact? Sarah asked. Agent Reynolds is sympathetic, but his supervisors are shutting him down. Apparently, Walsh has friends in the Bureau leadership. They're calling our evidence unverified intelligence from questionable sources. Sarah's jaw tightened. The same bureaucratic walls that had protected Kane were now protecting Walsh. The system was designed to protect itself, not to pursue justice. There's something else, Morrison continued. I've been monitoring communication intercepts. Walsh knows someone. Penetrated the Baltimore facility. She's activated a security protocol called Scorched Earth. Whatever that means, it's got people scared. Sarah had a sinking feeling she knew exactly what Scorched Earth meant. In intelligence terminology, it was the systematic elimination of evidence, witnesses, and anyone who posed a threat to operational security. Walsh wasn't just protecting her confirmation, she was preparing to bury everyone who could expose her crimes. We need a new approach, Sarah said, her mind already working through alternatives. If we can't stop the confirmation through normal channels, we'll have to do it during the hearing itself. Sarah, that's insane. The Russell Building is crawling. With security. Capitol Police, Secret Service, military personnel. You'd never get close enough to not talking about an assault, Sarah interrupted. I'm talking about testimony. The hearing is public, broadcast live on multiple networks. If I can get inside that room, if I can present the evidence directly to the committee, they won't be able to ignore it. The silence on the communication link stretched for several seconds. When Morrison spoke again, her voice was heavy with concern. Sarah, you're officially dead. If you show up at a Senate hearing, you'll be arrested before you can say a word. And that's assuming Walsh's people don't kill you first. Not if I'm invited, Sarah replied, pulling out a smartphone and scrolling through news articles about the hearing. Senator Elizabeth Harper is on the Armed Services Committee. She's been critical of Pentagon spending, suspicious of defense contractor relationships. If I can reach her, convince her to call me as a witness. A dead woman can't testify before Congress. But a whistleblower can. Someone with first-hand knowledge of weapons smuggling operations. Someone with documented evidence of criminal activity at the highest levels of the Pentagon. Sarah was already walking toward the Senate building, her mind racing through the logistics of what she was planning. It was dangerous, probably suicidal, but it was also the only way to ensure that Walsh's crime saw daylight. Senator Harper's office was on the 3rd floor, accessible through a public entrance that was monitored but not restricted. Sarah had spent the previous evening studying the building's layout, security protocols, and staff schedules. Getting inside wouldn't be the problem, surviving long enough to deliver her message would be. The office's reception area was staffed by a young man who looked like he had been working on 3 hours of sleep for the past 6 months. Congressional staffers during confirmation season were overworked, undercaffeinated, and generally too busy to ask difficult questions about unexpected visitors. I need to speak with Senator Harper about the Walsh confirmation, Sarah said, placing a manila envelope on the reception desk. I have evidence of criminal activity that the committee needs to see before the vote. The staffer barely looked up from his computer screen. Ma'am, the senator's schedule is completely booked. If you'd like to submit written testimony, this can't wait for written testimony, Sarah interrupted, opening the envelope to reveal photographs from the Baltimore warehouse. General Walsh is running a weapons smuggling operation. These photos show military equipment being shipped to terrorist organizations. The confirmation hearing is in 5 hours. The staffer's eyes widened as he looked at the photographs. Sarah had chosen the most damning images, shipping containers marked with humanitarian aid logos, but handled with explosive ordnance protocols. Manifest documents showing impossible weight discrepancies, communications logs with Walsh's digital signature, authorizing transfers to known terrorist front groups. I need to show these to the Chief of Staff, the staffer said, reaching for his phone. No, Sarah said firmly, placing her hand over his. I need to show them to Senator Harper. Directly, right now, before word gets out that I'm here. Something. In Sarah's tone, the quiet authority of someone accustomed to life and death decisions, made the staffer nod. He stood up, gathered the photographs, and disappeared through a door marked private. Sarah waited, every instinct screaming that she was exposed, vulnerable, making herself a target. But sometimes the most dangerous course of action was also the only effective one. 10 minutes later, Senator Elizabeth Harper emerged from her private office. At 62, she was a veteran of Washington's political wars, someone who had earned her reputation by taking on fights that other politicians avoided. Her expression as she looked at Sarah was a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Ms. Harper began, Collins, Sarah Collins. And Senator, I need you to know that what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but every word is true and every piece of evidence is verified. Harper gestured toward her office. Come in, but I should warn you, I have about 10 minutes before my next appointment. 10 minutes is all I need, Sarah replied, following the senator into an office that spoke of decades and public service walls, lined with photographs of Harper meeting world leaders, legislation she had authored, awards from various civic organizations. Harper sat behind her desk, her attention focused entirely on Sarah. My staffer says you have evidence about General Walsh's confirmation hearing. What kind of evidence? Sarah spread the photographs across Harper's desk, each one accompanied by documentation that told a story of systematic corruption. General Walsh is the head of a weapons smuggling network that has been operating for at least 5 years. She uses her Pentagon access to authorize transfers of military equipment to front organizations, which then sell the weapons to terrorist groups and criminal organizations. Harper studied the photographs, her expression growing increasingly grim. These shipping manifests, if they're authentic, they show a massive breach of national security. They're authentic. I obtained them 2 days ago from a warehouse in Baltimore that serves as a distribution hub for the operation. But Senator, there's something else you need to know. General Walsh has ordered the elimination of anyone who threatens to expose this network. She's responsible for the murder of Sergeant Jake Morrison, who was investigating equipment discrepancies at Fort Bragg. Harper looked up sharply. You're talking about a sitting general ordering the assassination of American soldiers. I'm talking about a criminal who happens to wear stars on her collar, Sarah replied. And in 4 hours, the Senate is about to give her access to military operations worldwide. Harper leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. Ms. Collins, these are extraordinary accusations. If they're true, General Walsh belongs in prison, not on the Joint Chiefs. But if they're false, you're asking me to destroy the career of one of the most respected officers in the military. I understand the stakes, Sarah said. That's why I'm here. Senator, I was part of a classified unit called Ghost Unit, we discovered Walsh's operation 3 years ago, and she had my entire team killed to protect it. I've been living under a false identity since then, but I can't stay silent while she gets promoted to a position where she can do even more damage. Harper's eyes narrowed. Ghost Unit was disbanded after a mission went wrong in Syria. All personnel were reported killed in action. That's the official story. The truth is that we discovered Walsh's smuggling network and were eliminated before we could expose it. I'm the only survivor. The office fell silent as Harper processed this information. Sarah could see the wheels turning. The senator was weighing political calculations against moral imperatives, considering the potential consequences of action versus inaction. Even if everything you're saying is true, Harper said finally, The confirmation hearing starts in a few hours. There's no time for a full investigation, no opportunity to verify evidence through normal channels. Then stop the hearing, Sarah said. Call for a postponement pending investigation. Use your position on the committee to demand answers. On the word of a woman who's supposed to be dead, based on evidence obtained through what appears to be breaking and entering. Harper shook her head. The other committee members would vote to proceed over my objections. Sarah leaned forward, placing her hands on Harper's desk. Senator, I know this is difficult. I know it's politically dangerous. But how many American soldiers have to die before someone takes a stand? How many terrorists get American weapons before someone says enough? Harper was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photographs spread across her desk. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of a decision that would define her legacy. There is one option, she said slowly. The committee allows for witness testimony during confirmation hearings. If I were to call you as a surprise witness, you would have the opportunity to present your evidence directly to the committee and the American people. But I'm supposed to be dead. That's actually an advantage. Dead people can't be intimidated, threatened, or bought off. And your resurrection would be the kind of dramatic moment that captures media attention. Harper smiled grimly. Sometimes, the best way to tell the truth is to make it impossible to ignore. Sarah felt a surge of hope. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it was also exactly what Ghost Unit had trained for, taking impossible odds and turning them into victory through courage and determination. When? She asked. The hearing starts at 2 p.m. Walsh is scheduled to give her opening statement first, followed by committee questions. I can call for witness testimony at 3:30. That gives you 90 minutes to prepare for the performance of your life. Sarah stood up, gathering the photographs. Senator, if I do this, Walsh will try to have me killed before I can testify. People are probably already looking for me. Then we'll have to make sure you stay alive long enough to tell your story, Harper replied, reaching for her phone. I'm calling the Capitol Police. They'll provide security until the hearing. No, Sarah said quickly. No police, no security details. Too many opportunities for Walsh's people to infiltrate. I'll handle my own protection. Harper looked skeptical. Miss Collins, we're talking about the most secure building in Washington. What makes you think you can protect yourself better than professional security? Sarah smiled, and for the first time in months, it was the confident smile of someone who knew exactly how dangerous she was. Because, Senator, I'm not just a whistleblower, I'm a weapon. And weapons don't need protection, they provide it. As Sarah left Harper's office, she knew the next 4 hours would determine whether justice prevailed or whether Walsh's criminal empire would be legitimized by the highest levels of government. The confirmation trap was set. Now all she had to do was survive long enough to spring it. The Hart Senate office building's hearing room buzzed with anticipation at 2:47 p.m. C-SPAN. Cameras captured every angle as General Patricia Walsh sat ramrod straight at the witness table, her chest adorned with ribbons that told the story of a distinguished 30-year career. Behind her, a gallery packed with Pentagon officials, defense contractors, and political allies radiated confidence. This confirmation was supposed to be a formality. Walsh had just finished her opening statement, a masterful performance that emphasized her commitment to national security, her innovative approaches to military logistics, and her vision for America's defense in an increasingly dangerous world. The committee members nodded approvingly, their questions softball inquiries designed to showcase Walsh's expertise rather than challenge it. Senator Elizabeth. Harper waited until precisely 3:28 p.m. before dropping her bombshell. General Walsh. Before we proceed to final questions, I'd like to call an additional witness. Someone with direct knowledge of military logistics operations that may be relevant to your confirmation. Committee Chairman Senator Robert Mitchell looked confused. Senator Harper, we didn't receive any notification of additional witnesses. Our schedule, Mr. Chairman, Rule 17 allows for emergency witness testimony when new evidence comes to light that directly impacts the confirmation process. I invoke that rule now. The room stirred with murmurs of confusion and curiosity. Walsh's face remained impassive, but Harper caught the subtle tightening around her eyes, the first crack in her composed facade. "Very well," Mitchell said reluctantly. "Call your witness." Harper turned toward the gallery doors. "I call Sarah Michelle Collins." The name meant nothing to most people in the room, but Walsh's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her face went ashen, her hands gripping the edge of the witness table as if the room had suddenly begun spinning. For a woman trained to maintain composure under enemy fire, the sight of a ghost walking through those doors shattered every defense. She had carefully constructed. Sarah entered wearing a simple black suit that couldn't disguise the predatory grace in her movements. She walked down the center aisle with the measured pace of someone who had faced death so many times that a room full of senators held no terror. The gallery erupted in confused whispers as photographers snapped pictures of the unknown woman who had just derailed a major confirmation hearing. "State your name for the record," Harper said as Sarah was sworn in. "Sarah Michelle Collins, formerly Sergeant First Class, United States Army Special Operations Command, Ghost Unit." Her voice carried clearly through the chamber, each word precisely enunciated. "Serial number 123456789. Officially killed in action. Syria, April 15, 2022. The room exploded. Reporters frantically typed on phones. Committee members exchanged shocked glances, and the C-SPAN cameras captured every moment of the chaos that followed. A dead soldier testifying before Congress wasn't just news, it was the kind of story that brought down governments. Mitchell gavelled for order. "Miss Collins, if you were killed in action, how exactly are you here today?" "Because the mission that supposedly killed me was actually an assassination attempt ordered by General Walsh to prevent Ghost Unit from exposing her criminal activities." Sarah's gaze never wavered from Walsh, who looked like she was watching her own execution. "My team discovered that General Walsh was running a weapons smuggling operation, selling American military equipment to terrorist organizations. We were eliminated before we could report our findings." "That's preposterous." Walsh finally found her voice, standing so abruptly that her chair toppled backward. "This woman is obviously mentally unstable, possibly a foreign agent attempting to—" "Sit down, General," Harper commanded with quiet authority. "You'll have your opportunity to respond." Sarah reached into her briefcase and withdrew a tablet. "Computer. Senator Harper, with the committee's permission, I'd like to present evidence obtained from a warehouse facility in Baltimore, Maryland, that serves as a distribution center for General Walsh's smuggling network." The tablet was connected to the room's presentation system, displaying high-resolution photographs that told a damning story. Shipping containers marked as humanitarian aid, but handled with explosive ordnance protocols. Manifest documents showing Walsh's digital signature authorizing transfers to known terrorist front groups. Financial records linking Pentagon accounts to shell companies in offshore havens. These photographs were taken 72 hours ago. Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. "They show military equipment being prepared for shipment to organizations that the State Department has designated as terrorist groups. Equipment authorized for transfer by General Walsh using her Pentagon access codes." Walsh was on her feet again, her face flushed with rage and desperation. "Mr. Chairman, this is obviously fabricated evidence. This woman has been dead for 3 years. She's clearly working for foreign intelligence services attempting to—" "General Walsh," Sarah interrupted, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Would you like me to tell the committee about Sergeant Jake Morrison?" The color drained from Walsh's face. Morrison's name wasn't in any of the evidence Sarah had presented. wasn't connected to the Baltimore warehouse or the shipping manifests. But Walsh's reaction confirmed what Sarah suspected: Morrison's death hadn't been an accident. "Sergeant, Morrison was investigating equipment discrepancies at Fort Bragg," Sarah continued, addressing the committee but keeping her eyes locked on Walsh. "He discovered evidence of the smuggling operation and was preparing to report it when he died in what the Army called a training accident. But it wasn't an accident, was it, General?" Walsh's composure finally cracked completely. "You have no proof. Morrison's death was investigated by investigators you selected, using evidence you controlled. Convenient how the inquiry concluded so quickly, isn't it?" Senator Mitchell was struggling to maintain control of the hearing as reporters pushed toward the front of the gallery and committee members shouted questions over each other. But Harper pressed forward with surgical precision. "Ms. Collins, do you have evidence linking General Walsh directly to these alleged criminal activities?" Sarah activated a new screen on the tablet, displaying encrypted communications intercepts. "These are message logs from General Walsh's personal communication account, obtained from the Baltimore facility servers. They show direct coordination with smuggling operations, authorization of weapons transfers, and ... double quotes." Sarah paused, letting the tension build. "Discussion of asset elimination for individuals who threatened operational security." The final communication was displayed in stark black text against a white background. "Collins problem resolved. Asset eliminated. Operation Lighthouse cleared for Phase 2 implementation." The message was dated 3 days ago, sent from Walsh's verified Pentagon account to an encrypted recipient, identified only as Prometheus. "As you can see," Sarah said quietly, "General Walsh believed I was dead. This message confirms her direct involvement in ordering my assassination, just as she ordered the elimination of my Ghost Unit teammates and Sergeant Morrison." The hearing room fell into stunned silence. Walsh stood frozen at the witness table. Her career, her reputation, and her freedom crumbling in real time. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, presented by a woman who had literally risen from the dead to deliver justice. Senator Mitchell's voice was barely a whisper. "General Walsh, do you have a response to these allegations?" Walsh looked around the room, at the cameras broadcasting her humiliation to the world, at the committee members who had been prepared to confirm her an hour ago, at the Pentagon officials, who were already calculating how to distance themselves from the scandal. When she spoke, her voice carried the hollow tone of someone who knew the game was over. "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination." The room erupted again, but this time the chaos was different. This wasn't confusion or surprise. This was the sound of a political earthquake, as one of the military's highest-ranking officers essentially confessed to treason on live television. Harper leaned forward. "Ms. Collins, in your professional opinion, what would have happened if General Walsh had been confirmed to the Joint Chiefs of Staff?" Sarah's answer was delivered with the cold precision of a sniper's bullet. "She would have had access to military operations worldwide, Senator. The ability to authorize weapons transfers to any organization, anywhere, with minimal oversight. The smuggling network would have expanded from a criminal enterprise to a fully sanctioned operation of the United States government. And American soldiers would have continued dying from weapons sold by their own leadership," Harper added. "Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what would have happened." The gavel came down with finality. "This hearing is suspended pending a full investigation by the Department of Justice. General Walsh, you are advised that anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Walsh was led away by federal marshals, her 3 decades of military service reduced to a perp walk broadcast live on every major network, Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she had carried for 3 long years. Ghost Unit was finally avenged. Jake Morrison's death had meaning. The truth had won, but victory came with its own complications. 6 hours later, Sarah sat in a secure conference room in the Justice Department, surrounded by FBI agents, Pentagon investigators, and representatives from various intelligence agencies. The debrief had been going on for hours, each detail of Walsh's operation dissected and analyzed. The Baltimore warehouse was just one node in a network that spans the globe, Agent Richardson explained. We've identified similar operations in Norfolk, San Diego, Jacksonville, and Pearl Harbor. Walsh wasn't just smuggling weapons, she was running a shadow military-industrial complex. How many people were involved? Sarah asked. Hundreds. Defense contractors, shipping companies, financial institutions, military personnel at every level. Some knew they were breaking the law. Others thought they were part of legitimate black operations. Richardson's expression was grim. This is going to take years to unravel completely. Sarah nodded, understanding the magnitude of what she had exposed. What about the weapons that are already out there? The equipment that's been shipped to terrorist organizations? We're working with international partners to track down and recover what we can, CIA Deputy Director Carson said. But realistically, a lot of it is already in the hands of people who want to kill Americans. That's a problem we'll be dealing with for decades. The room fell quiet as everyone processed the implications. Sarah's testimony had prevented Walsh from gaining even more power, but it couldn't undo 3 years of weapons flowing to America's enemies. There's something else we need to discuss, Agent Richardson said. Your legal status. Officially, you've been dead for 3 years. Your current identity documents are fraudulent. And technically, you're a WOL from the United States Army. Sarah had been expecting this conversation. What are my options? We can arrange for your official resurrection, Carson said. Reinstate you with the Army, backdate your discharge, provide full veterans benefits. Set you up with a new identity and a comfortable life somewhere safe, in exchange for your continued cooperation. Testifying at trials, helping with investigations, consulting on counter-smuggling operations. Your expertise is valuable, and this case is going to generate dozens of prosecutions. Sarah considered the offer. After 3 years of hiding, the chance to reclaim her identity was tempting. But she had learned not to trust government promises, especially from the same system that had allowed Walsh's operation to flourish. Need time to think about it, she said. Richardson nodded. Take all the time you need. But Sarah, you should know what you did today was extraordinary. You single-handedly exposed one of the largest military corruption scandals in American history. You saved lives, protected national security, and proved that sometimes one person really can make a difference. As Sarah left the Justice Department that evening, she found Detective Janet Morrison waiting outside. Jake's sister looked older than she had in Montana, worn down by months of seeking justice for her brother's death. I wanted to thank you, Morrison said. For Jake, for Ghost Unit, for all of it. You kept your promise. Your brother died seeking the truth, Sarah replied. He deserved justice. They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 women who had lost everything to Walsh's greed, but had found the strength to fight back. The fight was over, but the healing would take much longer. What will you do now? Morrison asked. Sarah looked up at the Justice Department building, where lights still burned in windows as investigators worked through the night to unravel Walsh's network. Then she looked out at the city beyond, millions of people going about, their lives unaware that their security depended on soldiers, willing to sacrifice everything for the truth. I think I'll try being Sarah Collins for a while, she said. The real Sarah Collins, not the ghost, not the supply clerk, not the weapon. Just a woman who's finally free to choose her own path. As she walked away into the Washington night, Sarah Collins, survivor of Ghost Unit, bane of corrupt generals, defender of truth, disappeared once more. But this time, she wasn't hiding from her past. She was walking toward a future she had earned through courage, determination, and the absolute certainty that some fights are worth any sacrifice. The ghost had finally found peace. The soldier had finally come home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.